Welcome to the Alakus podcast. This is class number 8 in the discourse called Machlokes 5672, which is the Machlokes is the 6th discourse in the great book B'Shashe Egdimu 5672. This is class number 8, and it is the third class in chapter 22. Okay. So in yesterday's class, in the last class we were learning how the effects that is necessary on the Sharshe Ha'oros, which means that the lights, the original source of the lights, which is rooted in the Kav, which is rooted in the Orin Sof and the infinite light before the Tzimtzum. And over there are these 10 Esespheres Agnuzais, but even though already the 10 Spheres Agnuzais, they're already, we might say already a source for the lights that will eventually be the souls of the Kalim, of the vessels of Atzilus, yet we learn that there needs to be a Tzimtzum. The lights cannot reveal themselves as they are, and yesterday we learned there are three disadvantages, so to speak, or three reasons why the lights require the tzimtzum, because if not for the tzimtzum, and what the tzimtzum affected, because if the tzimtzum would not have been in these initial, in the light that is the Orin Sof, that's before the tzimtzum, I'm talking already in the secondary element of light, where the light is already predisposed to 10 spheres, yet if the light would emerge as it is, number one, it would be too intense, and no vessels. There would never be able to be mislabish and kalim, which means it would never be able to be contained in vessels. Number two, he says, then all the lights would have come out be his arvus. They would all come out mixed together, not as separate lights. And not that they won't come out. They would all come out in a equally, which means they would not come out in a system, in an orderly fashion, where one energy precedes the next energy and the next energy precedes the next one, as they currently are, where these energies evolve one from each other. But instead, they would all be equal because they would all emerge directly from the source. And we discussed the proof to that when the kochos atzmi, when the essential powers of the soul reveal themselves in the time when the filter is down, the powers come out all together as opposed to individually. And that's not Hashem's intention. Hashem's intention is that the lights should go into vessels. Number two, his intention is that there should be a seder ishtalshalos, there should be an order of evolution where higher and then comes lower. And number three is that if the energies would come out as they are, they would never experience compromise one with each other. They would all be in such an intense state, they would be untolerating or intolerable, as they wouldn't tolerate each other, and they would never be able to have what we call a skalalus integration. The integration comes only when the spheros, number one, are no more in a state of etzem, of essence, which means they're more like a ray coming out, filtered ray. Number two, they go into vessels, and only when the energies go into vessels, that's when they are weakened enough, so to speak, that you can start finding points of communication or points of tolerance for opposing views, and the ability to be able to integrate various different powers, which is what Hashem wants, is the power of Olam HaTikun, where all these various different forces come together to create one mosaic or one unified, synthesized state of existence. So the spheroids would be not in a state of eskalalus. That's what we learned yesterday. And now he's going to Va'alkein, and therefore he says, "So yeah, tzimtzum ba'orin sof." The tzimtzum wasn't the orin sof baruch hu b'sharshei ha'oros, in the roots of the lights. Number one, lias nimshachim spheros miyuchedes. Number one, as opposed, they should come out individual spheros. Shelo yeh b'chneses arvos v'is achdos. They should each one present itself individually. not all of them together come blowing out in one shot. And when you, and here's another thing, when the sphera comes out, you can separate the chachma from the others. Now it's interesting. You're separating it, but for the sake of later reunifying it. You're separating it to give each one a voice. But precisely after each one's a voice, then they can communicate with each other and express themselves. If they keep if they don't give each other a voice and they're just in their essential state, then they're essential enemies, so to speak, essentially opposites from each other. Like we said yesterday, I gave you an example of two people. They could sit next to each other because they're never talking, but there's no way that they would ever be able to tolerate each other. But when you give them a voice and they can talk, and you create a space for dialogue, then even though in the beginning there might be clashes, but from the clashes they will come to understand each other. So that's the weakening of their energies. And he gives the example. From the chachma, remember these 10 spheres are 10 spheres start with chachma, with wisdom. So from the wisdom that is included in the Ein Sof, blessed to see, nimshacha b'chenes hachachma b'his galus. The process of the tzimtzum of the contraction was to allow the chachma to come forth as chachma. Initially, the chachma is all a potential kind of with the bina, with all the others, indifferentiable. As we spoke, they all share the same space. Now the chachma comes out post tzimtzum, the first emanation of chachma, whichever level that is, chachma adam kadman. I'm not exactly sure on which level. He doesn't say which level, but it's already a differentiatable chachma as chachma comes out. Now it's drawn onto its own. It should not be mixed with all the other spheres. Through this, that it comes out individually. So the first thing that happens is the chachma becomes b'pchenas nikeres. It becomes recognizable that it's chachma. For it to appear to be the light of chachma. The initial essence spheres agnuzais, you can't detect chachma, bina, this, that, because it's all in such an abstract, hidden state that there's no way you can even see the beginnings of the flavors of this and this. Although we know that they're there, but they're there in an unrecognizable state. So you need them to come through the filter, and then each one presents itself individually, and then you can already feel the chachma in the chachma energy, the bina in the bina energy, and so on and so forth. And as we're going to see soon, they will also present themselves one after the other, not altogether. Now, when we say that they become recognizable, it doesn't become nikeres b'pchenas heker atzmi chas v'shalom. It doesn't, God forbid, become recognizable, that it becomes recognizable with a recognizing of itself, which means a self-recognition. V'hainu. And we'll see and it's interesting. This possibility he so negates that he calls it chas v'shalom, God forbid. What does that mean? Hainu. Liyos. What would mean it has a heker atzmi? Liyos b'pchenas shinui hamahus. That it gets essentially changed from what it was before. Legabe sharsho makoira, to its source, its root, and in its source. In its source, it is Or Ein Sof. It is Or Ein Sof. It's infinite light. Once it's now coming through the filter and the tzimtzum, and it's emerging now as an individual power, we might argue now it became chachma. So what's here? Chachma. Now, chachma and Or Ein Sof are two different things. Initially, it was infinity and undefined. Remember, we learned earlier that all the Or, lifnei hatzimtzum, before the tzimtzum, is pashut, is simple. Now it's chachma. So we would say it now metamorphosized and changed completely from what it was before. Now it's a mahus chachma. It's a substance of chachma. And before that, it was Or Ein Sof that has a slant to produce 10 possible spheres, but you couldn't say it's chachma. So then we would be saying that that there is a change. Now he rejects that so strongly that he says chas v'shalom to say that. So when I was learning this just for the first time, when I was like reading this just the other day, I was having a very hard time. Like, well, why? Okay, he says it's not that way, but why the chas v'shalom? Why, God forbid, as if this would be the a terrible thing. We'll see in a minute why it is. He explains, ki oisa hachachma mamish. It's not metamorphosizing. It's exactly what it was earlier. Before it was Or Ein Sof. Now it's Or Ein Sof as well. Because it's still, let's see why. Because it's still Or. It's light. It's not the kalim of Chachma. It's not the vessel. He's going to differentiate in a moment from the light of Chachma to the vessels. The vessels of Chachma become Chachma. That's who they are. The light of Chachma is still Or Ein Sof. It's still Or. And remember, Or me'ein hamor. Or is always, whether it's the Or that's lifnei hatzimtzum, that's the light while it's still in the source. Remember, we look like the light of the sun while it's still in the sun. Then there is the light of the sun that goes out of the sun. The light of the sun that goes out of the sun is the same light that was in the sun. It's just that maybe now you can notice it more. Inside the sun, you don't notice the light because you only see the sun. The same idea is over here. The light that is now emanated post Tzimtzum is the same light that was before the Tzimtzum. That's what we're saying. It's the Kav. The Kav is the same light that was before. The only difference is that now the Chachma that was there before, but it wasn't recognized and wasn't felt, because it was part of something big. It was mixed with all the other spheres, so to speak. Now, because of the tzimtzum, all the other 9 potential, so to speak, was held back, and this is shining. But it doesn't change. So let's understand that for a moment, what that means. Again, I think this is the way I'm understanding it. I'm understanding it like this. The kalim become a thing. They become a metzias. Or is so it becomes a metzias of chacham. It becomes an existence of chacham. The light always retains connection, and the difference between kalim and oir is that kalim are not connected to this. Remember, we learned a whole long discussion how when the vessels emerge, the vessels get produced. The vessels emerge, their relationship to the source is one not in a state of dveikus. And we had a whole discussion how even these vessels come about. It has to come through the letters of the Rishimu. It has to come through the hiding of the source. It has to come through a clash. Remember, we said the Or Yashar and the Or Chayzer, the emanating light and the rebounding light have a collision, and that kind of creates kind of an energy kind of breakage. And then you can start producing vessels, because vessels are already a thing. Oir is not supposed to be a thing. Oir is God shining. When we say Oir HaChachma, it's God himself shining into Chachma. So therefore, what's the sense in Oir HaChachma? In Oir HaChachma, the sense is that, what's the Oir? The Oir, it's a ray of God. God is a Kol Yachal. God is an omnipotent being. If God is an omnipotent being, because of his omnipotence, because he can be anything, he has a potential for everything. So when the Or was still in the Or Ein Sof, before the Tzimtzum, the Or was saying, let's see the statement of the Or. The Or was saying, it was revealing that God is a Kol Yachal, God is an omnipotent being. The original Or, even before it becomes 10 Sfiros HaGnuzos. It was emanating, it was revelation. What's revelation? Revelation is giving off the quality of the essence is beyond quality. The essence is the essence. The Or is already revealing a quality. What's the quality? The quality is that God is a omnipotent being, and he can produce whatever he wants. Stage number 1 in the Or Ein Sof. Stage number 2 in the Or Ein Sof. Once Hashem is already emanating this light for the audience, you can't say anymore it can be anything because the world can't tolerate anything. You have to already create some framework. So therefore, you're saying that the Or Ein Sof, has potential for 10 powers. Oh, so you're already narrowing. But because it's a potential for 10 and it's a singular potential, so to speak, for all 10, so you can't differentiate one from the other. You still sense very much that it's Or Ein Sof. Now, when you're differentiating the Or from this state and you're moving forward to create individual lights, what you're seeing over, what you're feeling is the Or Ein Sof, the infinite one, the Or, God, with his infinite potential, is emanating one of his potentials, particularly to create intelligence and wisdom. So it's not over here that there is a power of wisdom, there is intelligence. There is the God himself who can be an intelligent being. He can also be a kind being. He can also be a compassionate being. But right now, in this particular emanation, what you're sensing in the Or, in God, is that he could be an intelligent being. Or that he could emanate intelligence. And that's the difference between the Or of Chachma and the Kalim of Chachma. The Kalim of Chachma, they are already intelligence. And therefore, it's already separated from the Or Ein Sof. And it comes about through this whole disconnect. Light is always, it's Hashem infused, Hashem emanating himself. What? His Or Ein Sof. And that's why we said that the Or, even when it goes down in Tatzilus, it's always Pashut. It's Belima. We said earlier, it doesn't have a substance. It's not Chach. It's always not Chach. Yet, on the other hand, we're saying what? It's the Or of Chachma, not the light of Bina. The answer is that right now, it's highlighting the potential of the Or Ein Sof to emanate Chachma. It is not Chachma. It's God's power to emanate Chachma. So therefore, it's still without substance. It's still Or Ein Sof. And the tzimtzum that we're talking about over here is called a tzimtzum b'derech miut, because you're not going away completely from what was before. As soon as Hashem wanted his light to be received in worlds, he already created a framework of 10 building blocks, of 10 powers. But the light was so simple that it included all the 10. Before this state, it included spherois ein kates. It was without an end spherois. Now the light was kind of bent, and he bends the light to be a potential for 10. Not because essentially it has though, but because his intention is to go into vessels. So that's already capping the light, capping the potential, focusing the potential to be sensed that only as a potential for 10. Then the next stage, and that's what we're talking about over here, is when when the light displays its potential for each sphera individually. Now we understand why he says, Chas v'shalom, God forbid. Because if the oiros themselves would become something, then you would have a creation that is disconnected from God. You would have things. The whole point over here is that God himself imbues and infuses all of creation, and everything is really only him. The Kalim could separate. But the Or, which is the divine investment into the Kalim, they always are him. That's why he says it's not that it becomes, I guess that's what it means, Heker Atzmi, that it essentially recognizes itself as Chachma. No, it's essentially always Or Ein Sof. but it's the potential now of the Or Ein Sof as it is declaring, I can emanate Chachma. Not because it's essentially limited to Chachma, but because it chooses to emanate that particular power. Essentially, it's part of the Or Ein Sof. But right now, it's raying out a ray to produce Chachma. As he says, Ki oisa. Now, if that's the case, that potential was there already earlier. Ki oisa chachma mamish, k'moshi b'makoira, as it was in its source. Rak, only. Shayadei shanech l'kom mishara sfirois, through this that it got differentiated from the rest of the sfirois, then his galom and makoira became revealed from its source. Hereinasis b'pchinas madrega nikeres. Now it becomes recognizable as a particular potential for something particular. The ein zekamoi b'esavos hakelim, and here he makes that differentiation that we mentioned. It's not like the coming into being of the vessel, shenisbar el Perek Yud, which we learned earlier, 12 chapters ago, in chapter 10. The Yeshloimar, we said, the shalagabe sharshan mekoyram b'pchinas koyach hagvul. Kamoi shulif ne'atzimtzum. Over there we were comparing the kelim of the 10 spheres of Atzilus, how they compare to earlier stages of the kelim. For example, the kelim of Atzilus, how they compare to Adam Kadmon, to the kelim of Adam Kadmon. And then eventually we said, how does it compare to the Rishimu, the traces? And then we said, how does it compare to the Koach HaGvul, to the power of limitation that was in the Or Ein Sof? So we said over there, if you compare the root of the kelim, and what's the ultimate root of the kelim? The ultimate root of the oiros, what's the source of the lights? The 10 spheros agnuzais. That's the source of the lights. What's the shayrish hakelim? The koyach hagvul, the power of limitation that's in the Or Ein Sof. Yet, there's a major difference between how the kelim come from the shayrish hagvul, from the power of limitation that's in the Or Ein Sof, and how the oiros emanate from the 10 spheres, from the hidden 10 spheres. Because kelim become something. And therefore, they become completely be'ein aroch, they become totally new, yesh me'ayin, so to speak, from the koyach hagvul in the Ein, because the koyach hagvul that's in the Ein Sof is still Ein Sof. The koyach hagvul, the power of the self-limiting power that God has, is part of his infinity, like we discussed many classes earlier. Because he's so infinite, he has to also be able to limit himself. So it comes out that in that level, there's nothing but Or Ein Sof. So definitely, when you end up with a power called intelligence, a keli of intelligence, that's something totally new. So the yeshlam the gabe shoshim mekarim b'chinas koyach hagvul k'moishu lifnat tzimtzum before the tzimtzum hakelim u'be'ein aroch legamri. The kelim are ein aroch; they're completely no comparison to them at all. Like yesh me'ayin, there's something from nothing. And that's why we say that va'achachma me'ayin timatzei. The kelim of Atzilus, we say that they are called me'ayin; they're something new. But in the lights, gam la'achar tzimtzum, even after the lights pass through the tzimtzum. Einam, they are not be'ein aroich, they are not completely cut off. They're not completely inconsequential. Legabe shorshin and mekayran to their source and their root, which is what? The essa spheres agnuzais, the 10 hidden spheres that are in the Or Ein Sof. Why? Because it's the same substance. It's just that before you didn't recognize it because the one potential was included in the potential of all 10. So you didn't see it. The inyan at tzimtzum, and what is the tzimtzum? Is only to allow it to emerge, to be seen. The inyan at tzimtzum, rak sheyiyah his galus ha'or, is only to allow for the light to emerge itself. Ubepchinas or prati, that it should come forth as a specific light. Bifnei atzma. Shal yedei through this that the light, the potential for chachma in the Or Ein Sof is now emerging, and it's first of all, it's coming out, it's coming forth as a particular, so to speak, potential of God, of Hashem to emanate Chachma. Shaydei Nasa, Through this, you're already sensing intelligence. You can recognize it. Nasa b'pchinas metzias nekeres. It becomes in a state of an existence that is recognizable. You see a force for chachma. And the fact that it got separated from the general potential is also a tremendous diminishment in that energy, in that potency, in that power. It's diminishing it, it's filtering it, and less revelation. Okay, va'inyan hu, this is the last piece over here. Let's leave this Be'ezras Hashem for the next class, and that will be the last class in chapter 22. And then we'll move on to chapter 23. Baruch Hashem. Meanwhile, everybody have a wonderful Shabbos and Rasi Mashiach now.